Here. Hi, everyone. We are absolutely thrilled to have Allie Bloyd. Allie is a conservative author of Uncensored America, thought-provoking poetry of faith, family, and freedom, which looks into, hold on, I'm just keep on admitting people, which looks into the life and its beauty, the importance of family, personal growth, the rewarding yet challenging task of owning a business, and the power of faith in times of trouble or uncertainty. As a female, mother, business owner, wife, daughter, and American, I love that you have that in there. I think that that's so important. I'm still admitting. The topics covered in their book are a reflection of Bloyd's real life experiences, yet relatable to the masses. The book will encourage readers to think for themselves, challenges their beliefs, and expand their perspectives, what is truly important. Allie, I would love for you to talk to the group about your book, about being a conservative. You and I have had numerous conversations, and I've read a number of your pieces and they're fantastic. So I definitely want to plug your book after the fact, and also talk about it on this call. We do Q&A at the end. I'm going to be muting lines and also stopping my video, and I'm going to pass the baton over to you.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to all of you today. Those who are watching afterwards, excited for you to hear this as well. So I am Allie Bloyd, and I am all of those things that was previously shared in my bio. I do run a business. I am a mother of a 5-year-old daughter. My husband and I are building a homestead. We bought a 61-acre farm about a year ago, and we are going to be fully transitioning to living out there really in about the next month or month and a half. I am a speaker. I really try and use my voice in as many ways as possible, and that is through writing, through video, speaking to people in person, any means of communication that I can, because I think all of us know that are on this call or listening afterwards that we are in a very unique time right now, not just in our country, but in our world. And I think that there's so many things that people feel helpless about in the current state of our nation, especially. And so my goal today is really to kind of share some of the things that I've been able to do, hopefully to encourage other people to be able to try some things like that, maybe to inspire you to take some of that and put your own unique spin on it, and really to get the message out there to other people to make some sort of difference, however small we feel it may be, and also to really just kind of protect and secure our families and ourselves when we don't necessarily know what's coming next. So I'll start off by talking a little bit about my book and kind of how I wrote it, why I wrote it, and some of the things that I've been able to have from the release of that book that I never really expected. So I have been writing poetry since I was about 5 years old, and I've always written about things that were on my mind, not any one specific topic. I write about relationships, I write about things that are going on in the world, I write about things that I'm feeling, whatever it is, didn't really matter, and that's just been a constant in my life. Well, a couple of years back, I noticed a definite shift in some of the topics that I was writing about as things started to get crazier and crazier in the world. And I never set out to write a book like this. It was something that I was really doing in my spare time. And I had several people encourage me to go ahead and publish this. So writing a political poetry book or kind of an activist poetry book was never really my intention, but that is how it turned out. And I think ultimately that, all of those things that I was writing, not really understanding what it was for, it was all happening for a reason. And these poems have gotten tremendous feedback. And it's so interesting because I think all of us have a unique style of communication or some special skill in the way that we speak to others or share information with others. And sometimes we can discount those things and we can feel like nobody wants to hear those, or there isn't a place for something like that in the world. But doing a poetry book on topics that are not necessarily what the poetry world is used to, and definitely not what the political activism space is used to, has shown me so much. And I think that the most important thing that I've learned from all of the feedback from this book is that people need things simplified. They need things in bite-sized formats. And they also need information that has an uplifting purpose to it, even if the topics being discussed are really intense. So obviously, all of you that are listening today, you have a desire to get the word out. You have desire to try and make a change, to speak up, to use your voice, and to create some sort of impact. And I think that we often get so bogged down by all of the negative things that are happening that when we communicate with others, we aren't being the uplifting force that we really should be to create change. So I think that bringing attention to those really heavy and serious topics are important. But I also think that there's a way that we can take those topics, make them a little bit more easily digestible, especially for people who are not paying close attention to the things that are going on. We kind of expect everyone to know the same information that we know, and ultimately they don't. But also, we need to leave them with a nugget of hope at the end. Otherwise, it really can be just this energy force that gets sucked out of people when they're consuming this information, which makes them not want to learn more, not want to do more. And, they really just retreat at that point. So this poetry book has really inspired a lot of people around me to do similar artistic pursuits to share similar messages. And so I think the first thing I would encourage all of you to do is to ask yourself what your communication style is, or what your creative format might be if you feel that you have one. Sometimes you might have one and not even realize it yet. But the power of art and of creativity in the time that we're in, I feel that it can't really be overstated, because art has been used for thousands of years to shape culture and to change minds and to draw attention to things that other people may be glazing over. And it also does it in an approachable format. Art does not really feel threatening most of the time, even if we disagree with its concepts. It's very difficult for people to argue with art. And I think that in this culture, the desire for people to argue is so significant that we need to find something that will set a different tone. And because art is subjective, and ultimately most pieces of art, whatever creative format they may be in, they don't tell people one answer. They're really there to provoke thought. And so that was the concept of my book, thought-provoking poetry. So nowhere in this book is it forcing beliefs on people or telling people what to think. It's drawing analogies and creating metaphors and sometimes highlighting information that others simply don't know, but really leading them to draw their own conclusions. And I think that that's what all great art really does. And that's something that we need to be very much paying attention to, because that's how we're going to change more minds. The style of communication on top of that, I also think is really important. There are several slides that I actually have that I could go through that will encourage you to really think about the ways in which you're communicating with others and how you can do it in the best possible way. So I know that there are a lot of things going on in the school system right now. There are a lot of things that people want to stand up and speak out about. And maybe you're already doing that, but some people may not feel like they're really able to speak in the way that they want to, or do it in a way that's actually getting others to understand these concepts. And so really taking a closer look at that is something that I do think is also very important, because my business is in social media marketing, Facebook advertising. I see so much of what goes on online, probably more so than the average person. And if you really look at the way that people are communicating in these online landscapes today, you'll see something really significant. And that's that people are not actually listening to one another. If you respond to someone, they're not actually consuming what it is you're saying. They're already thinking about how they're going to respond to it. And sometimes it may have no connection to what it is you shared. That means we're literally living in a world where two people can be communicating with one another, but neither person is actually understanding what's being said. And if we can't create conversations in our community, in our family, in our circle of friends that will get that information across effectively, we're never actually going to be able to, make the shift that needs to take place. So I would just say, any creative thoughts that you have, just let those run, and maybe get into some of these projects and see what comes out of it, because I really do think that art in a lot of forms can play a significant role in changing our culture and the way that people are thinking about the times that we're living in. So after I released this book, I got a ton of PR around it. I got a lot of great feedback, and it allowed me to speak to some incredible people, to be on some awesome shows and do incredible interviews. And that was something that I never really sought out to do. It was a byproduct of me creating something that I was passionate about, just something that was inside of me that I needed to share, deciding that I was willing to, at that point, potentially risk my business, is how I felt, by publishing this book. And at the end of the day, it hasn't hurt my business. It continues to grow month after month. I have really been able to inspire a lot of other people to speak out as well. And change the world we live in. But when you do take a step and decide that you're going to potentially do something a little bit bigger or speak up in a more bold way, the impacts of that can spread far and wide. So I don't know how many of you are business owners or are in the professional space, but obviously with cancel culture and everything that goes on, there is a fear that if we do these things publicly sometimes, that there's going to be significant repercussions. But ultimately, I think that by putting this type of content into some sort of creative pursuit, the risk of that impacting you in a negative way is far less, because again, art is really difficult to argue with. Someone can say they don't like a poem, or they don't like a piece of writing, or they don't like, a picture or an illustration or whatever it may be, a song, but you can't really attack someone in the same way because it is subjective. So I do think that there is a place, especially for people who are in business or who are entrepreneurs, to be a little bit more bold and speak out, because there is a lot of power in those connections that we have in our community and our ability to create change. So if there is anybody listening that's, a business person that is a little bit hesitant for their own career at times, I would just say, first of all, it's absolutely worth it regardless. But second of all, you can do things in a way that does not hurt your career and take away your family's livelihood potentially by getting your message out there. So the other things that started to happen after I published this book, really in the country as a whole, it just started to continuously get worse. So I published this early 2021, and my husband and I had been doing a lot of thinking, as I'm sure all of you have, after COVID and all of the mandates and the regulations and the things we started to see, really about what we wanted our life to look like. And as someone who does pay really, really close attention to what's going on in the world and the events that are taking place, I knew that we were in for a reckoning as a country. And I did not necessarily believe things were going to get better right away. So as we sit here in early 2022, that's exactly what's happened. The last year has gotten progressively worse in a lot of areas, whether that be in the school systems or the economy and inflation and the job market and the increase in these totalitarian actions that are being taken. It seems like from every direction, we are being bombarded by negative and, sometimes even frightening things that really make us question, what is this going to look like for our family in the future? And I started to really desire just to kind of get out of the city area. We weren't right inside of the city, but we were not far outside of it. And So looking into buying land was something that we decided was really going to be necessary for us. So this is something a lot of people have asked me about how we actually kind of facilitated this and made this transition. And I think ultimately everyone's got their own desires and their own situation, but we were able to kind of creatively finance the entire project by taking out a home equity loan, buying our farm, getting a building loan from the same company. It's a local bank who was really easy to work with. And it was not a very difficult process. I think it's a lot easier than most people would imagine, but that's kind of really started our journey of building this farm, animal rescue, homestead, so that we can have a little bit more family security despite whatever may be happening in our world. And that also really sparked the conversation about what we were going to do with my daughter for school. So my daughter's 5 years old. She has been in preschool, up till this day. She would start in kindergarten later this fall. And in 2020, I really saw that there was no way that I could possibly send her into any school system, really. The schools in my area are some of the best in the state, the public schools. So I always thought that that's probably where she would go and didn't give it much thought other than just realizing that, hey, homeschooling is great. I was actually homeschooled for a year when I was younger. I also went to public and private school. So I had a pretty good experience in all of those school systems, but I'm very busy. I didn't understand how I was ever going to be able to make that happen. Obviously, COVID has really the response to COVID has forced all of us to take a deeper look about what's important, what we're willing to do, what we're willing to sacrifice to make the changes that we want to make in our family, most importantly, to protect our family in whatever way we choose. And I really had to start, figuring out if homeschooling was going to be the thing that we needed to do. And that journey has been super interesting. I've been able to learn so much about the ways that parents really rally together. We're getting her in a homeschool co-op, so she'll start that in August. And the parents in that co-op, they all create their little pods where even on the days they're not in the co-op, which is 2 days a week, they're still going to different parents, switching houses. So it's not on one person individually. So there are a lot of parents that are probably, considering things like this. Maybe you don't think it's possible, and it's definitely a lot harder for some than for others. But if it is something that you're thinking about, I can promise you there are ways to make it work and to figure out how you can continue to earn a living and manage your household while still educating your children in the way that you choose. So after we have kind of made all of these transitions, it really has been something that has given me a lot of peace, I think. And being able to now take this farm that we've created and share it with other people in our community, create events for people who need a place to go, be able to hopefully host rallies and speaking events on this farm property. It's giving us additional ways to be able to give back and continue to share the message. So all of that is really to say, I didn't exactly set out to do anything like this. I didn't set out to write this book. I didn't set out to be a homeschooling mother or a farm owner or anything like this. I was just somebody who was living their life. I ran my business. I love my business. And these things have happened because I saw the need for them and I was willing to actually take action and do something about them. And I think that's often the scariest part and the hardest part is taking those thoughts and those things that we are thinking about on a daily basis that are really eating at us and prompting us to action and not doing anything about them is what most people are really doing in the world right now. And I think we all have to take a bigger step in faith sometimes and say whatever it is that's on my heart that I feel like I need to do, maybe that actually is something that I need to do instead of thinking about it or worrying about it. And everybody that's here today or that's watching, clearly you have a desire to take action. And I think that there are so many ways that people just like you can take those natural God-given talents that you have that maybe you've kind of not even given yourself credit for and you can use those to spread the message and to wake people up and to fight back for what you need to fight back for, whatever that is in your life that you're dealing with. And ultimately start to create some of these assets and resources that I think are ultimately going to be necessary moving forward. Some of you have probably heard the parallel economy term, and if you're not familiar with it, it is essentially the idea that there's going to come a time, probably in the near future, that we will have to have a parallel economy that is more conservative. And it's not something that I think anybody wants or thinks is the best thing in the world. But as we've seen with the protests in Ottawa and GoFundMe, really holding their money hostage, all of these corporations and banks doing things that are completely against what they should be doing, but they're doing them anyway. We really can't put our family's livelihood or our financial security or any of those things at risk. And there's somebody in this room right now that probably has an amazing idea for something that this world needs. And all it takes is, putting in the work and having faith that you can actually do something about these problems that you're facing and starting to be a part of the solution in a bigger, broader way. So looks like Q&A is up in the chat, I guess. So if you guys have any questions, definitely let me know. Really just kind of doing a casual chat today. So anything that you guys want to talk about or ask me about, would love to discuss it. But ultimately, I think that, there are a few things that all of us can be doing first and foremost to try and raise greater awareness, to try and get our message a little bit more clear and a little bit more concise, whether it's speaking up at a school board meeting, whether or not it's speaking up, to your boss or your coworkers, maybe it's your circle of friends. It doesn't really matter what it is. I think ultimately there are a few things that we can all do to communicate a little bit more clearly to further the message, even if we don't go as far as writing a book or hosting an event or doing something that we think is a little bit large in scale. First thing, you really have to be able to back up everything you say with evidence. So this is something that I spend a lot of time personally doing, and that's just researching, looking at every piece of information I can on my subject matter. I have folders of screenshots in my phone where I save this information so that at any point, if I'm having a conversation with someone on a specific topic that needs to be based in fact, I have those things just at the click of a button. I can pull them up. I can cite studies or stats or whatever I need to do to be able to not just convince someone with my personal beliefs, but really with the facts and the evidence. So the next thing is being able to really clearly defend those things against criticism. So I think that being able to debate is such an important skill, but most people are not, they've never been trained on that. They don't really have a lot of experience in it. And after talking to a lot of parents who were going to school board meetings and things like that, I got questions from them asking how they should be communicating about these things they were upset about. And so it really started to make me understand what a lack of confidence there was with so many people just in their ability to clearly and concisely share this message. Even something that they're very, very passionate about, they didn't know how to do it in a way that would show whoever was listening that their point had a lot of merit. And so I think that being able to study any opposing viewpoints of those beliefs that you hold strongly is just as important as understanding the information that supports it, because obviously we live in a polarizing society, and at least 50% of people that you speak with on any given subject are probably going to strongly disagree with you potentially. So being able to understand what their points are, what their thoughts are, and where they're coming from will help you be able to more clearly communicate your message with them and actually bring something new to the table, potentially even convince them that maybe your point is correct, But even if someone doesn't agree with your point, they will still see that your point is valid and that you have every right to believe as you do, even if it is not exactly as they do. So the next thing I would say is, again, kind of like finding that medium for your voice. And everybody's got something that's a little bit different. I think everyone has a natural style that works for them. For some people, it might be doing videos. For some people, it might be doing audio or podcasts. For some, it might be writing essays or pamphlets or letters. For some people, it may be doing creative writing or actual artwork. Whatever it is, everyone's got something. And so finding that natural communication style, really thinking on it, will oftentimes help you just lean into that natural medium a little bit more. I also think that there is a lot of challenges with keeping a message focused when you are speaking to anyone on a topic that could potentially cause some conflict. And the best tip I could give anyone who wants to more clearly and effectively communicate and bring attention to certain issues is to stay focused 100% on the point that you're making. There is a tendency for people to take one snippet of what someone says, and if they are trying to rebut that, they will just respond to that one snippet and go off in a whole different direction. So you need to be paying attention for things like that and always steer the conversation back to the original point at hand. That's why you see so many people going off on these rants with each other. And ultimately, it goes down a rabbit hole of topics that ultimately have nothing to do with what they were originally there to discuss. So I think the next thing is to ask questions, sometimes more than you speak. And this can be really difficult to have a short one-sentence answer or response, especially if you're in a heated conversation or debate, or you are, in a situation that isn't exactly friendly towards your viewpoints. Asking a question is really kind of the concept of my book. Those questions can lead people to the answer. If you tell someone what to think, they don't want to hear it, mainly for ego. But if you can ask them a question that will spark those wheels turning in their own head, maybe even just plant the seed of that idea, they're going to have a much greater likelihood of starting to see what you are trying to say. But if we constantly are making statements, pointing fingers, making accusations at others when we're trying to have these conversations, it never really ends anywhere positive. So I'd encourage you to start asking questions whenever you're in these types of conversations, such as, what makes you think that? Do you think that's the whole story? What happens if you're wrong? Those are some really simple questions that can be extremely productive in a conversation. And it's one of my favorite communication formats to use when I'm in any type of discussion. It's also really important to kind of remove your opinion from the conversation. And I know that sounds a little bit weird because obviously we all have really strong opinions. But at the end of the day, people, if they don't share your opinion and they know what yours is right up front, they will be much more closed off to any information that comes after. So again, that's where keeping your message focused and asking those questions and relying on data and information to highlight important points, as opposed to stating your opinion all throughout the data, is a lot more effective in changing someone's mind. I also think it's important to try and approach things from a different angle whenever we're communicating with others. And that can look very different depending on what you're discussing, but I've always been a big fan of analogies and metaphors. And again, taking kind of a creative angle will actually spark people to think about things differently because they're not used to seeing something like that. And what we should be trying to do here is not, force an idea down someone's throat, but really open up their minds to the concepts that we're discussing so that they can take hold of these ideas themselves. And, again, it could be anything, but using the same talking points that you see all over the news or, in any type of conservative media or whatever. Some of them can be great talking points, but they're a little too played out in some ways, and people have heard them time and time again. So what it's going to do is associate you with someone else's talking point. And again, people tend to just kind of shut off anything else that you say afterwards. And again, just understanding the counter argument and having a response to that does make sense. Those are some really, really simple communication methods and tools that you guys can use no matter where you are to try and use your voice a little bit more effectively. All right,
Well,
Cindy.
Allie, I'll read these to you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think I might have pinged you separately. I meant to hit it to everybody. Do you have a resource? So Cinda's asking, do you have a resource or two of American-made products?
So are there specific products that you'd be looking for? Because there are a lot of different resources depending on what it is you're trying to find. For the most part, I usually just search for whatever it is I'm looking for that's American made. And that's typically how I'm making my buying decisions. Some things are obviously harder to find than others. But if you're really seeking it out, usually it's not that difficult. Most of the businesses that are American made are going to prominently put that information out there. So just do a little bit of research on whatever those products are. But if you have some specific products that you're looking for, feel free to reach out and I'll definitely let you know some of my favorites.
Yeah, Allie, we'll also make sure that the book information is in the Zoom call that we send out to all the members. I actually have a few questions for you, and I would engage everybody on the call to start asking questions as well to Allie. You talk about homeschooling, and I think that is a really excellent choice. A number of us on the call and in this community or in our communities are fighting, and you're giving us some really good talking points in order to keep it more of a high level conversation. If you do not have those options to homeschool, do you have suggestions? And I'm sure you've done that in regards to investigating private schools and or to having discussions with school boards. I mean, do you have any further information that you would like to give us?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's a little bit different in every state and in every county right now in terms of exactly what it is you're dealing with. I think that there are places right now that it is all you can do to just refuse at the end of the day. If you don't have those alternate options, if you have to be in the public school system, and there are always going to be parents that have to be in the public school system. So we really can't just as an entire country or movement retreat away from those things. I think it's very important that the parents that are not able to choose an alternate schooling method, that you fight for that school and for your child, because there is ultimately no way around it. Your tax dollars are paying for it anyway. People are going to be sending their children to public school forever. And the schools are the battlegrounds right now. If we just run away, all of us, then there's going to be nobody left to fight. And I think if you're in a very severe situation where they are refusing to engage with you, where nothing makes sense, I think that peacefully protesting and refusing to do what it is they're asking is obviously a good way to go. For some people, it would be having those conversations at the school board meetings. I've not seen a ton that are tremendously productive ultimately. And so I think it really comes to the point where you have to ask yourself, am I willing to run for the school board? Am I willing to take a greater responsibility in the community to be one of the decision makers, as opposed to trying to convince these decision makers that they need to hear another point of view? I think that's ultimately part of the problem, is that people who are more conservative have not necessarily flocked to these public positions because it's not necessarily something that we felt was going to directly impact our lives. Whereas the opposing team, if you want to call them that, that is really where they have flocked. And so because this has happened over a good number of years, we are in a situation where there is an ideology that is rampant across not just one institution, but almost all of them. And if there are not people who have very strong beliefs that are also in those institutions, there will be absolutely no balance whatsoever. It's not something that's super easy, but the truth is there are a lot of organizations right now that are willing to support anyone who is conservative and wants to run for the school board or who wants to run for any position. We know that this is important, and it's something that you have to learn as you go, just like everything else. But if you feel really strongly about it and you don't have another option, then that could be a great option for you. I think public schools versus private schools or maybe charter schools, it's really hard to say what's going to be the best fit for somebody. I have always felt that private school was insanely expensive and was not something I really wanted to look into, because I felt like if I was going to be willing to spend that much money to educate my child, I'd kind of just rather educate my child and spend more time with them and not spend that money just staying home if I had to. I think that there's probably a lot of great schools out there, but unfortunately, I have seen a lot of these same issues in the private schools, just as they have been in the public schools. So I don't even really believe that it is specific to a certain type of school system. I think ultimately, if you've got to make a change, you've got to do the research on not just the curriculum or the test scores. You've actually got to do the research on the people who are running the school, who they're taking money from, and ask yourself, is it going to be worth it for me to make this change only to potentially end up in the exact same position? And that's where being willing to fight for these things, no matter where you are, is really important, because we may find ourselves in that exact situation, even if we do move from one public school to a private school or a charter school, because they oftentimes have very similar goals. They just have a different financial structure.
So, Allie, these are absolutely excellent points. This group itself, Pennsylvania Conservative Women, and we started out by Conservative Women in the Mainline. That's how we started. Was a group of women that have really been aggressively working to change out school boards, to open up schools, to have our children be mask optional in school. We are in the latter of you mentioning a number of us, actually, again, we're all throughout PA, but a number of us on this call that are fighting in our schools district. It is the extreme. So we're fighting aggressively on every single issue. And what we have found is, again, to your point, the more we fight, the more we push, the more we're definitely starting to make a difference. I personally think that we're going to make a difference in the next few years. We're going to get the curriculum out. We're going to get a few more things, including school board members. That being said, we are in PA, which, as you know, majority of governors running, they are actually running on school choice, and that is the taxes go with the kid. So that would make the unions in PA and the public schools accountable as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so much of this really does have to happen in our elections. I think obviously elections are a whole nother can of worms. But there needs to be people that are really aggressively paying attention to those things as well. So volunteering to work in your local elections, wherever you can. I think that there is a place for everyone right now. And you guys are obviously not sitting on the sidelines, and that's what we need more of. People who are willing to do whatever it takes, realizing that we don't have to be Superman and do everything and fight all of these issues, because it can feel super overwhelming. But whatever it is that maybe most significantly impacts your life, or the thing that you are angriest about, or that you are, the most passionate about, that is obviously the thing that you should probably be focusing on and giving whatever extra time and energy you have to that, because ultimately it's going to go a lot farther than us trying to do a little bit here and a little bit there. So similar to what I was talking about with just finding that style of communication or that creative outlet, we've all got something to bring to the table, and being able to dial that in and really go full force with that one thing is what I think will help a lot, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed by the weight of all of the challenges and the problems and the issues that are surrounding us right now. And that often leads people to inaction because they just get so stressed out
Yep.
and so wound up that they don't do anything else. But the truth is, there are people, millions of people all over this country who want to fight. And we're all not meant to do the same thing. You know, I kind of equate it back to like our spiritual gifts or those natural talents that we have. Everybody's different and they've got something else to contribute. And so figuring out what your perfect place is the very best thing that you can do. And knowing that whatever you're doing in that little space is going to make a difference, it will go so far and it'll just kind of simplify everything. You don't have to stress about every issue in the world. You can really focus on the one thing that you want to move the needle on, go after it, start to recruit other people to help you with that, and start to make a change. I actually really wanted in those workshops that we were talking about, part of what I wanted to do was help people understand where they could best contribute in the movement. So taking a look at, you know, what their personality is, what they love to do, but also what resources do you have at your disposal? You know, what connections do you have in the community or the state? And that doesn't have to be like, you know, political connections or business connections. This can really just be what type of people are you connected to? Where do you have the ability to make an impact? You know, resources doesn't have to just be financial resources. It could be that, you know, you have a plot of land that you're not doing anything with that people could go and use for some type of event. It could be that you've got, you know, a talent for graphic design and you can help people make banners and posters and, you know, utilize your skills in that way. So I think everybody's got these things that are in some cases not being used for anything, and they want to make a difference, but they don't know what to do. Those are the things that I would look at. And there is a direction and a place that you can focus those skills and that energy, and you can make a big impact. You don't have to be like the front runner on an issue to make a huge change in whatever way that you can. I mean, we're in a war, and in wars, there are nurses and frontline doctors. There are also people that are cleaning the machinery and, you know, making different pieces and parts that people need. I mean, there's so many different roles that go into a physical war, but also this ideological and partially physical war that we are living through. And I think we just all need to be a little bit more confident about what those things are that we bring to the table, instead of just assuming that they are not worthy or that they're not big enough to matter. I think literally every little thing we can do right now matters, but the more that we can focus our attention on individual things instead of trying to spread our efforts and time and energy too thin, that's when we're going to be able to make the biggest impact. Because, you know, everybody's got things going on, families, work, life. You only have so much spare time in your day, and you've got to be able to give whatever time you do have to one single thing if you want it to make a difference.
These are such excellent points. And, you know, through our group and with our group, we reiterate all the time that your difference can be anything. Can be sending a letter to the school board. Some people need to be behind the scenes. They don't want to be front and center.
Absolutely.
And, you know, some people are the taskmasters and the doers, and there's others that, like, you know, are forwarding an email to someone else. And to me, that all is so important. We talk to our group about that all the time. Like, your contributions, again, if you have a coffee shop and letting us use your location, or you're sending out a letter or calling someone, are just as important. I absolutely believe that.
Definitely.
So if no one has any further questions, Allie, we cannot thank you enough for speaking with us. You have been absolutely fantastic. We want to promote your book as well. So we'll put the link on for our members, and also for the Zoom call to the members. You know that, again, I'm going to mention our event. So we would love I realize you have a ton of things going on. If you're able to come.
Yeah, I really want to try and come.
Yeah, you could just ping me afterwards. We'll talk about that. But beyond that, thank you so much. This was fantastic. I'll send you the link as well.
Awesome. Sounds good. And just to mention, in relation to the book, this book is actually a great one to share with people that do not necessarily believe the same things that you do. This is actually something that can open people's minds a little bit. And so I think that the people that you are not able to communicate with as well, maybe you get in heated discussions, things like this, this book can actually be a catalyst for a different kind of conversation where they're just sitting in their home, coming to some of these realizations and conclusions on their own without the pressure of having to respond or feeling like you're being, pressured into thinking a certain way. So just keep that in mind. I really think that that's something that is very, very important and powerful, to not just share these things with people who think the way that we do, but to share them especially with people who don't. So would love for you guys to check it out. Hope you really enjoy it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.